Number 10. Jack Black. Because of Jack Black's love of FNAF, with him playing it on Markiplier's channel with his son and making FNAF TikToks, people have theorized that he might be in the movie. Casting and updates on production have been slim to none, and while we know the film was slated to start filming this spring, we don't really know if it's started yet or what is going on or when it was actually set to start other than spring, or who is in it. So many questions. Still, considering Jack Black's interests and the fact that he is a talented and all-around entertaining actor, I would not be surprised if he appeared in the film. The question is, who should he play? Phone guy? William Afton? One of the employees at Freddy Fazbear's? Or maybe he could be Scott Cawthon himself at some point in the movie. Scott Cawthon, after all, has inserted himself into the world as a game developer.
Five Nights at Freddy's. That's where I wanna be for Nights at Freddy.
Number 9. Rating. The rating for the film is definitely something many of us have pondered on. Many people love FNAF, including younger kids. With that being a consideration, who the targeted demographic is for this film, and the varied ages in terms of its fan base, because I mean, it's not just kids, a lot of us love FNAF, it is possible that we'll see the rating of this film be lowered for this reason, in terms of what they'll be allowed to actually show. It makes the most sense that it'll be PG or PG-13 for this reason. If that is the case, the film will have to be careful in terms of what it shows or even implies, as a PG rating means that only some of the content is allowed to even be considered unsuitable for kids. Only some, and even considered. So many of the themes that we see in the games will have to be modified, cut, or made less scary somehow. The other theory with the rating is that we'll get one that more promotes and allows for the level of horror that we would expect. But in that case, the film would have to be a little bit more exclusive, with most children probably not being allowed to go see it. Either way, it seems we're going to have a problem when it comes to what is in the film in terms of horror components and who can actually go see it. And friends, before we move on to our next spot in the video, if you want to see this movie and you are concerned about the rating, or you're just like, let me see it, be sure to give us a thumbs up. It's true, when you give this video a thumbs up, it actually increases the speed at which the FNAF movie is produced. Number 8. Part of the multiverse. It's really hard to contemplate the potential for this film to be canon. I mean, we have all the Fazbear Frights books, and I mean there's also more coming, and it really depends on who you talk to as to what level of canon they consider those books to be, if they include them in the game canon at all. I personally feel like while there are contradictions between the world of the books and the world of the games, it is possible that both of these could exist within the same world if we just acknowledge the existence of a FNAF multiverse. Then everything gets to be relevant, and some things can even overlap in terms of similar stories and explanations for characters. With the film, we could also see the introduction of a new universe belonging to the FNAF multiverse. That then not only gives us answers, but also helps us to connect the dots, as well as undoubtedly giving us more questions. Because, this is still FNAF after all while being able to connect to the games and book canon, while still being able to have enough differences to keep us guessing and interested. Give me a FNAF multiverse, let's acknowledge it. Number 7. The real monster. The animatronics in the first game are the main antagonists you go up against, but as the story has developed throughout the game franchise, we have learned that although the animatronics pose great risk and have murderous tendencies, they aren't the main villain. William Afton is. I'm more inclined to believe that, like the games, some other greater villain will be revealed to be the mastermind behind it all, and that the animatronics in the end, like in the games, will also sort of be victims of that main villain. Perhaps it will be William Afton. The animatronics will just have vengeful spirits trapped within them who are kind of warped into something evil, and in fact in the end they may even help our hero by the end of the movie, banding together with them to fight against this greater evil. That would be really satisfying to watch, I think. Number 6. Markiplier. This is a fan theory that I personally think could actually end up happening. While Markiplier is a YouTube personality well known for his game playthroughs, he is also a performer and an actor, and has played characters in various music videos, and he even had his own YouTube original interactive adventure series, A Heist with Markiplier. He definitely is comfortable being on camera, and he has the personality for entertainment for sure. And he's a huge FNAF fan and supporter, so it would make a lot of sense if he got even just a small role in the film. Of course, Mark did tweet about his thoughts on landing a role in the FNAF movie in 2015, and he didn't seem too optimistic, tweeting, "To the people telling me I need to be in the FNAF movie, I don't think that's how movies are done." But hey, that was 2015 and it was a long time ago, and a lot has changed since then. Many fans are speculating that Mark will have a role in the film, but will likely have to wait to find out just what. Number 5. Time period. One thing that we always need to come back to with FNAF is the timeline, which honestly is it's kind of everywhere. What is this timeline? When it comes to the film though, it makes us wonder what year the film will actually be set in. Scott on Reddit mentioned that it would center around the story told in the first game and as the security guard we play as in that game named Mike. Does that mean it will be set then in the same time period or adapted to modern day? I feel like having a cell phone in your pocket that you could just, call for help on or use as a flashlight could make things feel a lot less scary. So it seems likely that the story will be told in a similar time period to the games, either the 80s or the 90s. Both of these time periods are also pretty trendy right now when it comes to eras that we enjoy revisiting in film, television, and other entertainment. What do you think? Will we see a more modern take on this story, or will it be set in the same time period as the games? Also, how will the movies even attempt to approach this tangled timeline? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 4. Visiting Pirate Cove. Everyone loves Foxy, so it's of course very likely that we'll see him appear in the film. But I believe we'll get not just a closer look at the restaurant's interior and get to explore it in a beautiful cinematic setting, but we will actually get to take a look behind the curtain and get immersed in what Pirate Cove is like. Foxy being such a fan favorite, I think will translate to some more screen time for the animatronic, as well as further exploration and development on not just him as a character, but also his personality and his home of Pirate Cove. I know that Foxy likely won't be the friend that we'd all hoped he was, sadly, but it would still be cool to see him more prominently featured in the film and to get to explore what might lurk behind that curtain. I really want there to be like a Freddy's so I can actually go to Pirate Cove, because I love pirates. I even have a pirate tattoo, so I'm so ready for this. Number 3. The franchise. If the FNAF movie focuses on FNAF 1, most people also expect, like with the games and books, we could see more films planned out, depending on the success of this one of course. Ideally, this FNAF movie could be a jumping off point for a whole series of films and a film franchise based around the games and even books at some point as well. It is possible that with this film, Scott and the studio could already be setting stuff up that will come into play later down the line, not just considering this film as a standalone story, but as a piece to a much larger, more intricate puzzle, like we've seen with other successful video game inspired film franchises and comics inspired film franchises besides. Number 2. Bite of 87. Another idea for the film is that it will be the precursor to FNAF 1 and simply focus on it in terms of setting it up. We could see the beginnings of the restaurant be its focus, or at least see an element of that included, perhaps focusing on the mystery of the Bite of 87. And maybe we'll also get a younger Mike in this movie, and also answering the mysteries behind the Bite of 87. This could be the film that sets up the world and with it establishes a more clear narrative in terms of the accidents that took place and who is at fault. It is also weird that I would actually be really into a sort of murder mystery vibe for a film that dives into the Bite of 87. Is that weird? Was it Mangle? I mean, I need to know. I have so many questions. Things are still unclear. Just give me a movie that explains the timeline. That would be magic to me. Number 1. William Afton's origins. One of the things that I feel like would be the most earth-shattering if it were to appear would be the origin story for William Afton. It would be amazing if we got a film centered on him and his life, which helped us to understand just why he became a murderer and what his motives are. Was Afton a well-intentioned business owner and family man and something happened to him? Or did he always have more sinister intentions when it came to the Fazbear franchise? Is his story real? Or does it perhaps only exist in video games made by the company who created Help Wanted and who are interested in simply sensationalizing an accident that happened at a real restaurant? It would be crazy if it turned out to be that meta of reasoning as to why he exists, but in a weird way it could also make a lot of sense and solve a lot of weird plot holes that we have. Either way, if we get some hints even to this huge question mark that is William Afton and why he kills, that would be amazing. Of course, with Scott, it tends to be a ratio of 1 to 10 for questions answered to questions created, so we'll have to wait and see if we get any answers or stories explaining this, and if we do, how many more questions they then create. Number 10. A twist. Obviously, we are already well versed in the story of FNAF. Well, I mean, well-versed isn't exactly accurate, as there are still admittedly a lot of pieces missing when it comes to the lore, but you know what I mean. There is a lot that we already know, like who the main villain is, how the victims were killed, etc, etc. Many of the mysteries have been solved, and then many still remain unsolved. So how will the film adaptation keep us on our toes? Well, some believe this will happen with debunked theories being utilized, giving us a sort of unexpected alternate storyline that can still surprise us. Such as, what if the phone guy was actually the purple guy? Or what if the experience of the games is all the recurring nightmare of the murderer who killed everyone and represents their guilt over what they've done? Number 9. Post-credits scene. I feel like this one is a given considering that we have so many successful franchises out there already, and so many other studios interested right now in turning their film idea into the next successful one. But what will the post-credits scene be about is the question. To warrant an educated guess, we would need to know a lot more about the plot probably, but for now we can try to guess based off of what we know about the story thus far. So, we know the screenplay Scott Cawthon and the team decided to go with is referred to as the Mike screenplay, and that it has the best pieces from all the other previous attempts. Many people believe that the screenplay will be based off of the events of the first game based on the name for it, so what does that mean? Namely that the post-credits scene will likely hint at the fact that the secrets that were revealed during the film are likely even bigger than we could imagine. We could see the hint at a greater villain such as William Afton or Stitch Wraith, or perhaps even Circus Baby and Sister Location. After all, the films don't need to follow the same path or order as the games, they just have to keep us intrigued and entertained. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder to hit that like button if you haven't already, and if you want more FNAF content here on this channel. Remember, every time you hit that like, it takes a day off of when we can expect to see this film. It's shortening the time. Just kidding, it's not shortening the time, but who knows, maybe it is, it could be possible. Number 8, Willy's Wonderland Easter egg. Everyone knows about the other film that recently came out that is basically Five Nights at Freddy's, but without the official IP or license. It stars Nick Cage as a passerby who gets roped into working the night shift at Willy's Wonderland, in exchange for having his broken down car repaired. His character spends most of the film not speaking, but proves himself to be more of a threat to the animatronics that roam the family restaurant than they are to him. Willy's Wonderland was not made in partnership with anything FNAF, but it was still evidently inspired by the franchise. It would be cool to see some kind of nod to Willy's in the film, even if it's just perhaps like a light joke poking fun at the copycat film or the franchise featured in it. Because although like they kind of are taking the idea, I kind of love when people are like inspired by things like FNAF and make cool stuff out of it. Number 7, Stitch Wraith? Another theory that I have is that we will actually get to see some crossover between the books and the film, with the appearance of the villain known as Stitch Wraith. In fact, I'm even thinking we might not see Stitch Wraith in the games until after their appearance in the film. The Stitch Wraith, being a seemingly methodical villain, could make for a good ally for a mastermind who is working behind the scenes and pulling all the strings. Stitch Wraith might not have as big of a role in the film, but appear in a post-credits scene and help to set up a FNAF franchise, being an important villain shrouded in mystery whose true purpose and master is revealed later on down the line. Kinda like we see in the books. Number 6, Springtrap. One of the scariest animatronics around is definitely Springtrap, which is the hybrid suit that William Afton wore and later found himself trapped in when he was spring-locked and impaled while wearing it. Springtrap is the main antagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. In FNAF 3 we face hallucinations which can terrorize us, as well as the very real threat of Springtrap, which comes with William Afton's body inside it, controlling the suit. Just the idea of a human being who became impaled by a bunch of springs and mechanics and trapped within a suit, each step creating agonizing pain as those locks and springs grind against your bones, is horrific. Also, just the visual image of an animatronic that seems to be oozing something bodily, some blood or pus with real eyes, it creates a powerful and haunting visual that would make for a compelling villain throughout the film. I'm just saying. Number 5. FNAF 1. The film will take inspiration from the first game, at least that's what we've been led to believe. This theory has been based around things Scott Cawthon said on Reddit and suggested the main protagonist of the film will be the security guard that we play as in the first game, and will expand on his story. The security guard is named Mike Schmidt, and many believe that this is an alias that is actually used by Michael Afton, William's son, who accepted the job for a yet unconfirmed purpose, but one that is highly speculated to be heroic or investigatory in nature. As such, the film is believed to have centered around Michael Afton, who will of course become the protagonist and possibly hero of this story. Number 4. Scott Cawthon plays Phone Guy. Obviously, we are all going to lose our minds if we don't get a Scott cameo or Easter egg somewhere in this film, but if we are going the way of FNAF 1, I think it would only be fitting if Scott reprised his role of Phone Guy, personally. He could of course just provide the voice for the character, who we may also never see in the film, just like in the game, but I think we are all hoping and expecting to see his face show up somewhere on screen, even if it's only briefly. I personally know I would love to at least get a single scene with Scott as Phone Guy where we see what ended up happening to him, or simply get a tease as to his gruesome fate on screen. There are a lot of ways that Scott as Phone Guy could make an appearance that would be satisfying and entertaining. Number 3. Puppet appearance. One of the characters in animatronics that I think is the most terrifying is the puppet, which makes me wonder if we could potentially see the character in the film. Will we get to know Charlie's story, or merely see this animatronic as some kind of monster? Will we even get to learn the truth of the trapped souls within the animatronics in this adaptation at all? Or will that reveal be left for a sequel as a kind of misdirect, because we'll be like, where was that? And then later they'll be like, oh, it's still there. I would love to see Charlie and Henry make an appearance of some kind, and for us to get some kind of insight into their story and involvement with the Freddy's franchise. If anything, as horrifying as the puppet is, I think because of Charlie's involvement and backstory, this could make the animatronic a really, really good option for what I was talking about earlier, with maybe one or all of the animatronics being somewhat helpful to our protagonist at some point in the film. Or perhaps Henry himself will make an appearance helping out in memory of his lost daughter, which could also be cool. Number 2. New narrative. While we've all speculated on which games will really inspire the film's story, and which bits of narrative from the games will make it into the film, it's entirely possible, like with other successful franchises, that the FNAF movie will take inspiration from the games and the plots there, but provide their own take on where the story goes and what secrets are revealed. After all, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is now a long and developed and highly profitable film franchise, has relied on giving people fresh takes on established characters and their stories, to keep those interested in the source material, the comics, the animated series, and previous animated films more on their toes. I think this is something that will be integral actually to the film's success. We want to feel that tie to the games, but we also want the movie to surprise us, because I mean, that's a big part of what we love in general about the games and their lore and this franchise. The twists, the turns, the speculation, the unexpected reveals. Number 1. Release date? When will we see this film? Most sources seem to claim that the FNAF movie is filming currently, with the film having been expected to start filming in spring of 2021, which I mean, is kinda now. However, if it was filming currently, it would be likely we'd see some kind of buzz about the shoot, and yet we don't really have any confirmed images from the set. There are, however, lots of fan film set images available if that interests you, and in fact some of those fan film sets are pretty impressive, so something to look at least while you wait for official images from the movie itself. The lack of set news and pictures, however, means that it's more than likely the film is still in pre-production stages, with our last report coming from Jason Blum late last year, stating that they were still ironing out the details of the plot, and Scott himself only making the post confirming the script premise 4 months ago. What does this mean for release? Well, we don't really have an announced cast yet, and once we have that, it'll likely be 2 years from then till we can kind of expect the movie to hit theaters, which means that if the cast was announced, let's say this year in 2021, we likely wouldn't be able to expect the film until 2023. So sadly, the release date could be a while. Number 10. Book tie-ins. In his Reddit post listing previous screenplay attempts and the final chosen pitch, Scott Cawthon mentioned that he tried 3 times to write a screenplay based on the books with co-writer Kira Breed Risley, but that his inexperience in screenplay writing ultimately got in the way of any of these sticking or being good in his opinion, even with Kira's help. However, it is possible that we could see elements of the books pop up in the film, either tied into the plot or alluded to in Easter eggs. I would still say it's a good idea to brush up on these books before watching the film, as I feel like focusing on the plot of the first game will give Scott more freedom to elaborate on elements of the books without being tied to them as much, which was likely the problem when he approached screenwriting solely from that angle. Number 9. New animatronic? This is something that would probably break the internet if it happened. A new animatronic being introduced in the film would be huge. While this theory isn't really based on any facts, it's a theory that I kind of still hope happens. I'm sure the FNAF movie will have tons of surprises in store for us to keep us guessing, keep us on our toes, and this is one that I personally would just love to see happen. There are so many animatronics that have been introduced via the games over the years. It would be cool to see a new animatronic find its way into the franchise via the film. The question is, what kind of animatronic would you want to see? And who do you think would be a cool animal or perhaps a non-animal animatronic to join Freddy's horrific crew? And friends, before I move on to this next spot, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. I promise you, if you click like, it means that all of your dreams will come true in this movie. Anything that you want, just think about it. Click like. Oh, it's gonna happen now. It's definitely gonna happen. Disclaimer, it might not happen. Sorry about that. Number 8. Golden Freddy's appearance. Golden Freddy is a rare character that pops up in the first game, so it is very likely we could see him pop up in the movie as well. But perhaps we'll get to see a different version of the character, a more synchronized one in comparison to the other animatronics. Perhaps we'll get to see an active animatronic version of Golden Freddy on the prowl in the film, and have him join his fellow teammates in terrifying our protagonist or protagonists. It could be cool to see Golden Freddy play a more active role in the film, seeing as how he's kind of more of a rare side character in the game. Or perhaps instead we'll get something more in line with that and only get a little peek or Easter egg in regards to his appearance in the FNAF movie. Of course, I'd prefer if he had a more active role, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Number 7. Nick Cage cameo. Nick Cage being the star character of Willy's Wonderland would make a pretty cool person to cameo in FNAF. 1. So many people are big fans of Cage, and 2. He just starred in a film that definitely had major FNAF vibes, while not being officially tied to the franchise or its own film in any way. Thus far, anyways. Also, Nick Cage is just fun, and he's usually up for a laugh with a good sense of humor, even when it comes to himself and his own body of work, so this could be something he'd be up for. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind a little crossover between the two very different films which share a very similar premise. Number 6. You've Got a Friend in Me. Well, we know that one of the screenplays Scott Cawthon got rid of, referred to as the Pawn Shop screenplay in his FNAF movie Reddit post, featured too much of a friendship connection between a boy and an animatronic. It could be possible that we'll still see some element of this reflected in the film. After all, the main villain, as we know from the games, is actually William Afton, and the animatronics, while murderous, are just as much his victims, souls of children trapped within them, fueling the vengeful actions of the animatronics, but really deep down wanting to be free. It would be cool to see some kind of team-up moment between our protagonist and at least one animatronic, where for a moment their goals line up and they are inclined even to maybe help one another. Number 5. Chuck E. Cheese sponsor. This seems highly unlikely given the fragile state that Chuck E. Cheese is in right now, having kind of just emerged from bankruptcy, but it could also be really smart of the Chuck E. Cheese franchise to team up with FNAF. After all, think of how much money they could make if they tried to appeal more to the FNAF fan, who keep saying at least how much they wish Freddy's was real and that they wish they could visit a version of the restaurant in real life. Ideally, a more safe version, I imagine, but I think the potential in terms of money that could be made all around from that partnership could be huge. It would be cool to see Chuck E. Cheese acknowledged or promoted somewhere in the film, considering it's as close as we have to a real-life Freddy's currently. Number 4. Freddy's pop-up. Closer to the release of the film, another idea for something we could see in terms of promotion, perhaps once again in partnership with Chuck E. Cheese, is a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza pop-up. Even if it wasn't a place you could go to play games and be entertained by animatronics, having even a pop-up delivery pizza place with costumed versions of the animatronics, maybe even delivering pizza, would be insane. Great for promotion, great for hype, and also great for revenue. Maybe even great for pizza? It would also blow my mind if this happened as a promotional stunt and the pizza itself was amazing. That would be unlikely, but I would also embrace it and it would be awesome. Number 3, lots of jump scares. FNAF heavily uses jump scares to startle its players, with animatronics each having their own jump scare animation, used to startle you once that animatronic has caught you, or depending on which game in the franchise you are playing, just to unnerve you if they happen to only be a hallucination. Jump scaring is also a technique typically employed in the making of horror films, where tension is built up for something to leap out at you, or when an otherwise calm or focused moment is interrupted suddenly by a ghoul or monster that unexpectedly startles you. Music is also a huge part of this technique, and having the right music come in at the right time can really heighten the fear you feel. Honestly, most horror films rely heavily on their score, their music, to startle you. Trust me. Try watching your favorite horror film on mute and see what a difference it makes. It'll probably make a really big one. Because jump scares are so heavily utilized in the games, it's likely we'll also see this horror tactic used heavily in the film in some capacity. I personally anticipate a lot of jump scare fake-outs just to keep us on our toes. Like a lot of moments where you're like, oh, is there gonna be one? And then there isn't one, and then they get you somewhere else. Ugh, I love/hate that in movies. Number 2, a very special cameo. On part 1 of my list, I talked about the theory that we could see Scott Cawthon reprise his role from the video game of Phone Guy, but while that would be super cool, admittedly just seeing him anywhere in the film would be satisfying. Any cameo would be great, and I will take it. Perhaps he could be himself in the film, a game designer, approaching someone in management at Freddy's about getting licensing rights so that he could make a game. He could be a guest at the restaurant. There could be an Easter egg featuring him hidden somewhere in the film. All of these would be satisfying for me. It feels pretty guaranteed though that we'll see Scott appear somewhere in the film. After all, fans would likely revolt if they didn't. And Scott Cawthon definitely loves to get in on the ground floor when it comes to the franchise and his involvement in basically just all of the parts in it. So having him appear in the film seems very on the nose for his kind of approach to basically all of this stuff. Number 1, questions answered. We may or may not see William Afton appear in the film, but regardless of if we see him or not, I am still hoping we'll get some questions answered when it comes to, well, the purpose of all of this. On part 1, we talked a bit about potential antagonists we could see here and potential motivations that could be revealed. But either way, I'm betting that this film will give us some answers to some pretty big questions. And like most other parts of the franchise, also give us just some pretty big questions to be puzzled out by fans later on. Because it honestly wouldn't be FNAF without a bit of unresolved intrigue now, would it? Mainly, I think this film will focus on why previous murders or other such terrors specified took place, and will solve that mystery. Perhaps just in a way that fits the plot of the film, or perhaps giving us some more universal motivation in terms of the games, books, and the overall FNAF verse.